I'm going to start to call everyone in from the wonderful food that's going to happen back there soon. Welcome everybody this morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Emerald Coast. I am Jay Patrick, a member of this fellowship and service leader this morning. The UU Fellowship of the Emerald Coast is a religious community united by UU principles and committed to service, spiritual growth, and caring fellowship. If you're visiting today, welcome. You can find more information about us on the back of your order of service and on our website, uufec.com. Please fill out a visitor card at the table by the front door so we can connect with you and send you information on upcoming events. Unitarians come from a liberal theological background stressing not creed but religious integrity, freedom to be true to our own search for meaning. Universalists stress expansive love that excludes no one. Together, we find value in most sacred texts and in all of humankind's life-affirming religious aspirations. Announcements are listed on the order of service. Of special note this week, we do have a Pride Choir Solstice concert. This is to celebrate the winter solstice with a concert by the Gulf Coast Pride Choir here at the UUFEC on Friday, December 19th at 5 p.m. Following the performance, join the choir for feasting and a fun Yule-themed witchcrafting night hosted by the Cypress Grove CUPS organization. CUPS is the Coven for Unitarian Universalist Pagans. It's like the association that works with pagans within the Unitarian Universalist organization. In addition to that, the Cypress Grove CUPS organization will be holding their annual Yule ritual on Sunday, December 20th at 5 p.m. It will be held outdoors, weather permitting, so please dress warm, cold time of year. Bring a dish to share after for the potluck. In addition to that, Karen has an additional announcement for today's potluck.
What a beautiful day and a happy time for everybody to gather together for food and fun. So today, instead of our coffee hour and second hour, we're having Thanksgiving dinner. And the process will be for you to go to one of the lovely decorated tables instead of going back. Well, you can get coffee, but if you get coffee, take it to a table that you've selected. And once everybody is seated, then we can call tables up one at a time to go and get all the lovely food. Remember, there'll be people behind you, so we'll have lots of seconds, but be moderate. And we have lots of ham and lots of turkey. So we invite everybody, even if you didn't bring a dish, we invite you to come and stay and enjoy fellowship and just have a good time. After which, well, before I say that, would the people who decorated tables please stand up? Thank you so much. These people will be responsible for cleaning up the table as well. We have a cart that is going to go around to collect the food and rinse the dishes, and there are bags for people to put their dirty dishes in to take home with them to clean instead of taking everything back to the kitchen. This is unlike our usual process, so we hope it'll go smoothly that way. After which, we will have the table set up to play games for our game time third hour. And so we invite you to stay for that. We have a lot of fun games to play on our empty tables.
Thank you, Karen. The prelude today, We Lift Up Our Hearts in Thanks by P. Chubb will be played by Cecile to prepare us for service. Lorelei will be lighting our chalice for us today. Our reading today was written by Leah Duran Jones. As we light this flame, we remember friends and loved ones, near and far, and we give thanks. As the fire burns brightly, we open our minds and our hearts to new ways of being, and we feel alive. As the room glows with warmth and kindness, we extend our circle ever wider to welcome those who want to come in, and we know love. Our speaker today is our minister, Reverend Kathy Hurt. She will be speaking to us today remotely in pre-recorded sections. We will now hear her opening words.
Morning, all of you, and happy Thanksgiving Sunday. I hope that the week that we're heading into now will bring you much feasting and festivity. Our opening words this morning are by Marjorie Kaloran. We gather to celebrate the abundance of our lives together. In this sanctuary, we harvest bushels of strength for one another and offer our crop with the hands of compassion and generosity. In the authentic manner of our conversations and connections, we cultivate a sweetness to lighten our spirits. May we be grateful for the many ways we nourish and uplift one another, for it is the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us. Our first hymn, number 349 in the Gray Hymnal, We Gather Together.
The children and young at heart are now invited to come forward for the Time for All Ages. I'll turn the time over for that to Joshua Moore, our Director for Religious Experiences. Exploration.
Howdy doody, y'all. Hello. Awesome. You know what? I'm actually going to use this because I have a little thing here. Good morning. I am Joshua, and I am the Director of Religious Exploration here. And in recent weeks, after exploring Buddhism and mindfulness for a couple months, we've been exploring the teachings of the man Jesus. And we've talked a little bit about the religion that was made in his name as well. We have been looking at different things that he was purported to say and asking deep questions about what they could mean. What did they mean back then? What could they mean for us now, here, in this Unitarian Universalist fellowship? Make sense? Cool. So, our story today is often called Jesus Meets the Samaritan Woman at the Well. But we don't need to focus on the whole story because there's honestly a whole lot there. Talk to me another time if you want. But as the story goes, Jesus was tired from a long day of traveling and was resting by an old sacred well. And he met a Samaritan woman who was there to get water from that well. And do y'all know what a Samaritan is? No? Well, you maybe have heard the Good Samaritan, but do you know in the Bible what they meant by a Samaritan? Like what someone like Jesus maybe would have thought, or someone like another Jew would have thought?
I think Ivy, in one of the lessons that we did in a religious exploration, said something about like they didn't like the people living in.
Yeah, so really the people in Judea did not like the Samaritans. And Jesus would have grown up with this around him to dislike, or at least be told to dislike people. Samaritans were in his time understood to be their enemies. And Jesus, being Jewish, would have heard a lot of this. But Jesus, in this story, he doesn't play into that prejudice. Instead, he addresses her directly. And this is from John 4, verse 7. A woman of Samaria comes to draw water. Jesus says to her, "Please, give me a drink." For his disciples had gone to town to buy some food. Then the Samaritan woman says to him, "How is it that you, a Judean, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" For Judeans did not associate with Samaritans. And Jesus says to her that if she drinks from the well of Jacob, this well in front of them, then she would be thirsty again and again and have to keep coming back to this well. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give, he said, will never thirst again. Indeed, the water I will give will become in them a spring of water leaping up to give life eternal. So this is the thing that I get stuck on. A spring of water leaping up inside of us, welling up from somewhere deep inside. That's a pretty bold claim, I think. And plenty of people will try and have tried to say that it means one specific thing or another. But no one quite agrees to be true, and no one can tell you or me what to believe either. When Jesus was asked, not by the well, a different time, he was answering questions like all of the time. When he was asked what the most important part of his message was, he said it quite clearly, that we should love each other like we are all one family. Love above all else. So, with that being said, here's a question for y'all up front. What do you think Jesus could have meant by a living water that wells up like a spring inside of us? No? Maybe? No? It's okay. Do you have any ideas? Does anyone out there have any ideas? Because if you don't, I'll tell you what I think. Hey, this is about exploring, right? This is about letting our minds go to places maybe we don't normally. So, what do you think happens when we actually love each other? Have you ever really thought about it? What happens when we live together in communities of love and mutual aid and caring? From my own experience, which is all I can speak from really, when I live into this kind of love, I feel more alive than I ever have. I somehow have energy that doesn't feel like it's coming from me. It springs up from somewhere deep inside. So remember, if you're feeling down, feeling low energy, or like you're crashing out, as the kids say, why not try the living water of love and community and care? Why not find someone, talk to them, plug into some activity, or just go outside and love a tree? Whatever it takes, find that energy. I tell you, it's hard for me as a person with chronic pain to just get out of bed sometimes. But what gets me here is the love I feel right now and the way I feel comfortable to share this deep thing with y'all here. And that gives me energy. So thank you.
The sharing of joys, milestones, and concerns is a tradition in our fellowship. You are welcome to come up and drop a glass into the water silently or while speaking a few words into the microphone. This practice shares our joys and helps support one another in our struggles. Remember to only share about others with their permission. This is a sacred time for us. for a moment of prayer and meditation.
Please join now in a spirit of reflection, meditation, and prayer. And for this time, I'd invite you to turn your hands upright, palms up in your lap, so that your hands are open there in your lap. That gesture is one of receiving, of receptivity. And with your hands up and open, in that gesture of receiving, reflect back on the last few days and what you have received in that time. Maybe simple experiences like the gift of a good night's sleep, the ease of a morning commute, a satisfying meal with people you enjoyed sharing it with. What were some of the ordinary, everyday gifts that came your way in the last few days? And now reflect back on the last few days and the people who you crossed paths with, people you live with, people you work with, people who live next door or in your neighborhood, people in this congregation, people perhaps at a distance, but that you connected with electronically. And what did you receive from all those people you crossed paths with this week? Always there's a possibility you received from them something you would prefer not to have received. So let that come to mind, as well as what you received from them that you're grateful for. A smile, a compliment, encouragement, a hand on your shoulder, some comforting words, help with a task. Some spiritual teachers would say that when we see our lives whole and fully, we will see that there is nothing in our lives that we have not been given, that did not come to us, that we did not receive. What if that were true? May our hopes and dreams take flight on wings of love. Amen.
After our song of dedication, greeters will take up the offering. Generosity is a spiritual practice. Our fellowship is supported by our pledges and donations. If you are paying your pledge with a check today, please make a note in the memo line. We also have a tradition we call Share the Plate, where we split equally all cash donations and checks not marked as a pledge with a local charity. For the month of November, our Share the Plate partner is our UU Fund for Emerging Needs. This fund is used to help members of our community with short-term financial assistance in the case of hardship. I'll now turn the time over to Reverend Dr. Kathy Hurt for our sermon today.
One of the best known stories about food in this culture is the biblical story of the loaves and fishes. The story is so well known that its principal image, loaves and fishes, has become shorthand for experiences in which a small amount of something is magically or miraculously increased into an overflowing amount of something. Just to refresh your memory, the story says that Jesus was once again engaged in his ministry of preaching to large crowds in an outdoor setting, and had been doing so apparently for an extended time. He wound up his sermon finally, only to realize that the people gathered to listen to him were tired and hungry. We preachers do regularly get a bit too entranced with the sound of our voices and stop paying attention to what is going on with our listeners. My training supervisor told me that I should stop talking when I hear people in the congregation starting to cough. Just so you know, I listen for your coughing. About the same time that Jesus came to this awareness, the biblical account has one or more of his disciple followers calling it to his attention. "Teacher, the people are hungry, and none of them have any food with them." And in the fashion of ministers throughout the ages, Jesus responds by shifting the responsibility to somebody else, saying, "Well, you feed them." And in the fashion of congregations throughout the ages, the disciples push back the responsibility with the usual arguments of insufficient money and insufficient time. "The pledge drive came in too low. Our budget doesn't have the funds to buy food for all of them. And besides, it would take too long to go into town, agree on what food we actually need, make sure there were some gluten-free options, and come back. It gets dark by then with being on standard time now." Then the story escapes the usual unproductive round of avoiding responsibility for dealing with an issue when Jesus, probably with a sigh and some rolling of his eyes, has the disciples get everybody seated. In the process, he tells them to collect any food, however meager, they can find among those present. The collection basket is not encouraging when the disciples finish the task. They come back with 5 loaves of bread, probably 5 pieces of pita bread, since this is the Middle East culture, and 2 dried fish. Maybe enough food for a couple of not very hungry families, and certainly not enough food to even contemplate sharing it among a crowd estimated to number about 5,000 in size. Jesus is undeterred, however, perhaps because, as some interpreters of the story would say, he's God incarnate and can do anything. Or perhaps because, as a more intriguing interpretation of the story would say, he has figured out how limited our usual perspective can be and how abundant the universe truly is, abundant beyond our wildest imaginings with the abundance we often call grace. He says some sort of blessing over the basket of loaves and fishes, and then instructs the disciples to begin passing out pieces of bread and fish. Why they don't argue with him or pronounce him deluded at that point is anyone's guess, since the basket clearly only held those 5 pieces of pita bread and 2 dried little fish. But they did as instructed. And then the famous miracle unfolded. With each piece of bread or fish handed out, another remained in the basket to be given, and another, and another. So the quantity of food was never diminished. So all 5,000 people not only had plenty to eat, but several baskets of leftover pita and fish were collected once the crowd began to disperse. The lesson drawn from the story might be a lesson about the powers Jesus could wield, or a lesson about the mysterious abundance present in the universe, an abundance we rarely see because we tend to be creatures with a firm belief in the scarcity of all things. Some interpreters have suggested that many in the crowd would actually have had the foresight to bring food along when they headed out to hear Jesus, and that all sorts of food, along with those famous loaves and fishes, were produced and shared among everyone present, with the lesson then being a lesson about sharing our resources so that all have all they need. All of those interpretations have meanings which can be useful for us to consider. Food, being fed, having enough food, having special food, and being hungry are images that surround us in this week of Thanksgiving more than any other time of the year. We have predictable set menus for the Thanksgiving meal that sometimes become a source of conflict given how traditional those menus may be. The Thanksgiving table typically has lots of dishes, more than any of the people seated around the table can consume. And perhaps at Thanksgiving, we're more likely to talk of being full, being too full, of not being hungry in the slightest. And even after being filled, we have leftovers to keep enjoying for several days. Ours is a culture that encourages a sense of hunger in us all the time. And many of the hungers we carry, the hunger to be loved and valued, the hunger for meaning, the hunger for the latest electronic device, the hunger for more money and a newer car and a bigger house, those are hungers which we can, whether we believe it or not, we can exercise a degree of control over. I can ignore my hunger for things, or at least manage it so it doesn't drive my every decision. I can manage my spiritual hungers for love and meaning, set them aside when practical matters need all my attention, pursue them over a period of time since they don't always come with any urgency attached. But basic physical hunger, the need to be fed, that is a hunger we ultimately cannot control, a hunger that, left unsatisfied, will in short order control us. We come into the world needing to be fed as a first need. All life long, that emptiness in our stomachs, emptiness in our hearts, emptiness in our souls. All life long we get hungry, we're fed, and in no time at all the hunger returns and we need to be fed once more. Just as we require someone to feed us when we enter the world, unable to feed ourselves, so are we limited in our capacity for feeding ourselves throughout the course of our lives. For just how much can I feed my hunger for love, for meaning? Or at some point, do I require someone else, some outside force, to step forward and satisfy that hunger? The crowd gathered to hear Jesus was hungry, but seemed to have no food of their own. As Jesus and the disciples tossed the responsibility back and forth between themselves, it became clear that nobody in the crowd could provide food. Jesus told the disciples, "You feed them." The disciples responded with arguments that gave the responsibility back to Jesus. "No, you feed them." Who feeds us in the end? Who feeds us? Parents, partners and spouses, other family members, ministers in churches, government programs, McDonald's workers, aides in hospitals and nursing homes. Who feeds us? Who satisfies those hungers which ultimately look outside ourselves for filling? In the meditation earlier, when you held your hands open in your lap and recalled what had been given you in recent days, Who were the people involved in your recollections? The people doing something for you, giving something to you? And what motivated them, do you suppose? The sorts of people who make their ways into Unitarian Universalist congregations, the sorts of people all of us gathered here this morning tend to be, are pretty independent, self-sufficient types. And no wonder our spiritual tradition is shaped in ways that are particularly appealing to independent, self-sufficient types. We place a premium on honoring the worth of the individual. We task each individual to search out for themselves what is meaningful and of highest value. We expect each individual to take in what is offered here and then determine individually whether it makes sense or not in their own life. That emphasis on independence and self-sufficiency came of age during the Reformation, as our ancestors pushed back against a spiritual culture that stifled individual thought and individual perspectives on religion in favor of groupthink and obedience to a hierarchy. And that emphasis has been with us ever since. Add to that the strand in the history of this country, which has repeatedly sought to protect individual autonomy, along with a culture which prizes uniqueness and individual achievement. And you end up with a world in which anything other than independence and self-sufficiency is scorned. But what happens to us when we enter times in our lives of being dependent on others to sustain us? I once listened to a member of a congregation I previously served, who I deeply respected for her wisdom, suggest that the primary challenge in life, once a person passed the midpoint, somewhere between the ages of 40 and 50, the primary challenge then began learning how to be dependent. The first half of life is learning independence. The second half of life is learning dependence. That observation struck me as profoundly true and profoundly terrifying. To learn how to be dependent, to entrust myself to others, to let another hold me up, to let another one day help me walk, feed me. Those are images of myself which I can barely tolerate. And nothing in the culture and not much in our spiritual tradition is available to help us with that difficult life lesson. To teach me how to be dependent. Nothing except the occasional catastrophe when I have no choice but depend on others, and nothing except the inevitable march of time and aging as I become less and less able to do for myself and more have no choice but to depend on others to do for me. It is a process of growing vulnerable, being willing to be open, to ask for help, and even more difficult, to accept help when it is offered. It means acknowledging that much of the time, and more of the time as time passes and I grow older, I am no longer the smartest person in the room, no longer quite as competent as I once was, no longer at the top of my game. The whole thing sounds like a losing matter, doesn't it? I give up something of myself as I depend on you. It is risky opening myself to you, letting you do something for me. It makes you, at least in that moment, more powerful than me. A losing matter. Yet something is gained as well. the lesson Jesus may have sought to impart when he fed the crowd. In learning to be dependent, in being willing to be vulnerable and open, we just may discover an experience of grace as the other, whether that other is a miracle worker, an ordinary neighbor, a stranger, a life partner, a God, a congregation, as that other turns out to be not only gracious and kind and ready to hold us up, but even can and will do so beyond what we may have imagined. Not until I agree to be dependent can I truly see all the grace that is available to me. Not until I am vulnerable can I experience the power that supports me when I can no longer support myself. The last time I visited my father before he died, he had become unable to feed himself through a combination of physical deterioration and mental confusion. This man, who all my life had loomed so large, sometimes as caretaker of the family, sometimes as feared disciplinarian, sometimes as thoroughly aggravating know-it-all, sometimes as surprisingly wise teacher. This man now waited patiently as I spooned up bites of applesauce and pureed vegetables into a mouth that opened in the manner of a baby bird, trustingly taking each bite I gave him. At first, I found myself cringing with the weirdness of it all. Am I really feeding my father? Then slowly I settled into the routine as just something that needed to be done. Not until I left him and returned home, never to see him alive again, did the meaning of that sad, simple experience come to me. We begin life utterly vulnerable. We close out our life once more utterly vulnerable. The one he had fed, me, became the one feeding him, and each of us, over time, caring for the other, holding up the other, recognizing that never can we make it through this life alone. Feeding another, whether the other is a helpless infant or a helpless animal, a sick family member or an aged parent or a needy stranger who you just cannot turn your back on, feeding another is a powerful, immediate illustration of that interdependent web of existence we hold up as our seventh Unitarian Universalist principle. Each time we eat, someone or something has fed us, and it is then our obligation, our privilege, to extend that to another, to feed the 5,000 who have no food, to feed the sick, to feed the powerless, to feed the neighbor who just lost a wife, to feed the father who's lost the ability to feed a spoon, to feed the immigrant who has neither home nor food. In our interdependent web, we give and receive grace as we feed and are fed, and ignoring either side of that exchange disrupts the beauty and balance of the web, denies its meaning. Independence is heady and wonderful. Dependence is scary and difficult. Yet it also teaches us how to let go, lie back, rest in the grace of the world and in the support of others, and be free. The one holiday, the one time we have as our focus, the experience of feeding and being fed, comes this week. I grew up, as perhaps many of you did, enjoying the myth of pilgrims and Native Americans miraculously joining around a table to celebrate their relationship and the many blessings they had received from a Protestant male god. We understand now how misshapen that myth was by a white dominant culture, how the dark aspects of early settlement in this country are obscured in that myth, how indigenous people were not merely disrespected, but brutalized. That so pretty first Thanksgiving table came at enormous cost to Native Americans. So we no longer circulate any part of that myth. Instead, we take the opportunity to create a story that is inspiring and respectful and true. A story in which persons who may be utterly different from one another come together at a table to feed and be fed. Because it is in feeding and being fed that we reach a common element we all share by virtue of being human. We not only need feeding, we need also to feed one another, and especially to make sure those who are most in need of feeding get the food they need, the actual food, the spiritual food of knowing themselves respected, even cherished. So maybe begin or continue writing that new Thanksgiving story this year. Invite someone you might never otherwise think of as a suitable dinner guest to your feast. Go join people you would not usually dine with. Resist the temptation to just write a check or drop off a can of cranberry sauce, since those efforts, while laudable, allow a distance to remain. Put that interdependent web we so love to talk about into action by letting it draw you to someone you never noticed before, by being willing to let someone else see a side of you that you don't usually share. Be part of a Thanksgiving table where you not only feed, but are being fed. Then turn and feed the person seated next to you. Let your Thanksgiving feast this year be a moment of changing the world, one spoonful at a time. May it be so. Amen.
Please, please stand as you are willing and able for our final hymn. We Give Thanks, number 1010 in the Teal Hymnal. We will be singing the song twice through. Lorelei will be extinguishing our chalice for us today. Our closing reading is by Maureen Killoran. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth. Our benediction will now be offered by Reverend Kathy Hurt.
Well, I wish all of you a lovely Thanksgiving. I know you're enjoying a feast together today after the service, but then later on this week, however you mark the holiday, I hope it gives you a time that is joyful, is spent with people you love, and a good reminder of the ways your life is blessed. The closing words are by Caitlin Collier. May love guide your journey. May hope be your daily practice. May gratitude be your companion. May compassion embolden you. And may courage always be your choice. Shalom, salam, namaste, blessed be, amen.
Thank you for that, Reverend Kathy. Our postlude, As We Leave This Friendly Place by J.S. Bach, will be played by Cecile. Please remain seated till the chime after the conclusion of the piece. Thank you, everyone.
Julie, thank you.